Appreciate you being here this evening. Let me get this turned on. Appreciate you being here this evening. I appreciate the opportunity to bring a lesson tonight. A little bit out of my comfort zone. Me and my dad, my brother, talk sometimes. I'm okay jumping up, get a song, being a song leader with very little notice, and that's no big deal. And they don't like that idea too much. But when it comes to preaching a lesson, they're pretty quick to be able to stand up before you and do a great job there. And that's probably my thing that I'm weaker at. So bear with me. We're going to be studying Daniel, as Brother Jeff said. I appreciate the prayer, Sam, for me, and I appreciate that song that Jeff led before I came up about the kingdom and the kingdom that we're a part of, and we're going to get to that today with this study in Daniel. When you think about Daniel, and see if I can, there we go. When you think about Daniel, we know about Daniel. We learn about Daniel from a really young age, and we know about Daniel in the lion's den. We know about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, and all of that stuff. We know about the dreams and different things. But there's another character, and I had this conversation with a few people, so a few people know who I'm thinking of. But there's another character in the Bible that reminds me a whole lot of Daniel, and I'll tell you who it is at the end of the lesson. But there's definitely someone in my mind that just has a ton of similarities with Daniel when you study the two stories and kind of look at their lives and what they did as servants of God. All right, so we'll be in Daniel. If you want to go ahead and open up your Bible to Daniel chapter 1. First, I want to set the stage, though, a little bit with the context of the book of Daniel. First off, you've got the northern kingdom of Israel. So Daniel was part of Judah. So by the time Daniel comes about, Israel's already been taken captive by the Assyrians. So just to kind of set that context, the northern kingdom of Israel had been conquered by the Assyrians, and that happened in 721 BC under King Shalmaneser of Assyria. That's recorded in 2 Kings 17. A lot of kings and a lot of dates tonight. Hope you can stand that. The southern kingdom, which is Judah, had been held together by a thread for years with constant conflicts with its neighboring enemies, especially Egypt under Pharaoh Necho and Assyria under King Sennacherib. King Hezekiah's prayer in 2 Kings 19. I said we'd be in Daniel, but let's turn there real quick. 2 Kings chapter 19. I wanted to catch that. Starting in 2 Kings 19, starting in verse 8, it says, Then the Rabshakeh returned and found the king of Assyria warring against Libnah, for he heard that he had departed from Lachish. And the king heard concerning Tirhakah, king of Ethiopia, Look, he has come out to make war with you. So he again sent messengers to Hezekiah, of course Hezekiah being one of the few good kings of Judah. Thus you shall speak to Hezekiah, king of Judah, saying, Do not let your God in whom you trust deceive you, saying, Jerusalem shall not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. Look, you have heard what the kings of Assyria have done to all lands by utterly destroying them, and shall you be delivered? Have the gods of the nations delivered those whom my fathers have destroyed, Gozan and Haran and Rezip and the people of Eden who are in Telassar? Where is the king of Hamath, the king of Arpad, and the king of the city of Sherevaim, Hena and Iva? And Hezekiah received the letter from the hand of the messengers and read it. And Hezekiah went up to the house of the Lord and spread it before the Lord. Then Hezekiah, and this is what I really wanted to get to, verse 15, Then Hezekiah prayed before the Lord and said, O Lord God of Israel, the one who dwells between the cherubim, you are God, you alone, of all the kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven and earth. Incline your ear, O Lord, and hear. Open your eyes, O Lord, and see. and hear the words of Sennacherib, which he has sent to reproach the living God. Truly, Lord, the kings of Assyria have laid waste the nations and their lands, and have cast their gods into the fire, for they were not gods, but the work of men's hands, wood and stone. Therefore they destroyed them. Now therefore, O Lord our God, I pray, save us from his hand, that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you are the Lord God, you alone. And that's exactly what's going to happen whenever you continue the story in chapter 19, in verse 35. It says, "And it came to pass on a certain night that the angel of the Lord went out and killed in the camp of the Assyrians 185,000. And when people arose early in the morning, there were the corpses all dead. So Sennacherib, king of Assyria, departed and went away, returned home, and remained at Nineveh. Now it came to pass, as he was worshiping in the temple of Nisroch, his god, that his sons Adramelech and Sharezer struck him down with the sword, and they escaped into the land of Ararat. Then Esarhaddon, his son, reigned in his place." So Hezekiah had prayed for deliverance from the Assyrians, and I think you could say that God definitely delivered when he killed, the angel killed 185,000 of his troops, basically destroying most of his army. And then he has to flee back to the capital city there at Nineveh, and he's killed by his sons after that. And it's not much longer that the kingdom of Syria is going to remain intact after that. All right. The kings of Judah after Hezekiah, you've got Manasseh. He was really, really bad. We read about the sins of Manasseh a lot in the judgment that he brought upon the children of Israel. Ammon was also bad. Josiah was a good king of Judah. Jehoahaz was bad. Eliakim was bad, and his name was changed to Jehoiakim by Pharaoh Necho, who the Jews or Judah had paid tribute to the Pharaoh Necho. And then after that, you've got Jehoiachin and Zedekiah, which were also bad kings. All right. Like I said, lots of dates and lots of kings. He's got a great name, Nabopolassar. That's a great name for a king. But he was crowned king of Babylon after gaining independence from Assyrian rule. That's going to be circa around 626 BC is when that takes place. And I'm still, getting to the context here. Daniel is born in Judah during Josiah's reign in about 620 BC. And remember, when you're thinking dates, we're not working up the ladder, we're working down the ladder because we're in BC time. So the bigger the number, the further that is in history, and as the numbers come down, that's getting more modern, more recent. So Daniel was born in Judah during Josiah's reign, about 620 BC. And here's just a map. I teach world geography and world history, so I'm a little bit of a nerd when it comes to the geography and the history with this stuff. And seeing the correlation of, I think one reason I wanted to do this study was I really appreciate the correlation between biblical history and what we know from the Old Testament with secular history and how all that ties together. And a lot of times you'll have, supposed scholars who find discrepancies or find, faults with the Bible. And it's really neat when you find that, those actually aren't true. But here's a map basically right before Israel and Judah are destroyed. You can see my laser out. So the Neo-Assyrian Empire, that's the kings we were just talking about, was Sennacherib and those guys. The Assyrians are going to conquer Israel, 721 I believe it was. And in the south you've got Judah, who holds on for a while, but when we say they were holding on, I think I said they were holding on by a thread. Literally, they were a autonomous nation, but they were paying tribute to other kings basically for their survival, including Egypt and Assyria as well. So we know that Egypt, of course, is down here. This is the Mediterranean Sea. We're going to get to Babylon, which is right here. We're going to get to the Medes, which is over here in this area. And then Persia is going to start off kind of being down in this area. And of course, Persia and Media, or the Persians and the Medes, are going to be a combined empire under Cyrus the Great. So that kind of sets the geographic scene of what we're talking about here with the book of Daniel. Nabopolassar's son is Nebuchadnezzar. This is back to the Babylonians now. So now Nabopolassar's son Nebuchadnezzar married Amytis, daughter of King Xerxes of Media, sealing a treaty between Babylon and Media. And I thought this was pretty interesting because, we think of the Medes and the Persians. We think that the Persians were a lot stronger than the Medes, and eventually they are. But Media is very much a major power, and I believe that God is working in a lot of this thing. Of course, God is working through Daniel, but God also is working through these secular kings to carry out His will, to carry out His judgments on the people of Israel and the people of Judah and things of that nature. And so you have basically an alliance that's going to be formed between Babylon and Media through the marriage of Nebuchadnezzar, which is important because after Nebuchadnezzar passes away, who is it that invades Babylon? Right? It's the Medes. Darius the Mede. It's the Medes and the Persians that are going to conquer the Babylonians. That's after this treaty is over because Nebuchadnezzar passes away, and he was married to basically a princess of Persia, or of Media. The Medes under Xerxes brutally sacked the city of Assur in Assyria in 614 BC. Just kind of some of the things that I read on that. The Babylonians, who were pretty brutal in their own right. The Syrians were also very brutal, but I think they were all shocked at how brutal the Medes were when they completely destroyed some of these Assyrian cities and conquered the Assyrians. And then the Medes and Babylonians together sacked the city of Nineveh, which is the Assyrian capital, and killed King Sennacherib in 612 BC. And those are things that you could find in secular history that are pretty well documented. After the capital at Nineveh falls, Assur-uballit is known as the last king of Assyria. He led a final resistance at Haran, but was defeated by the Babylonians in 609 BC, and the Assyrian Empire was gone forever. All right, 605 BC. This was a very busy year with things happening in world history. Nebuchadnezzar, who at the beginning of 605 was still a prince, he wasn't the king yet. He was the son of Nabopolassar. He defeated Pharaoh Necho at the Battle of Carchemish, which eliminated Egypt as a threat to Babylonian rule. Little side note on that, on Pharaoh Necho, and I don't remember if I wrote that down or not. Yes, this same Pharaoh Necho that had killed Josiah, the last good king of Judah, that's recorded in 2 Chronicles 35, 20 through 27. And it wasn't Necho's aim to go and destroy Judah or to kill Josiah. Josiah actually went and attacked Egypt, and Necho, the way it's recorded, he was very kind of perplexed and didn't really know, because Judah at that time didn't really stand much of a chance to the Egyptians and Necho's army, and Josiah was killed. But anyway, I think that was part of, again, God's plan in all of this, to keep the Assyrians from being conquered before it was time, so that the Babylonians could do that. All right. Here's just basically a current map of what this area looks like, of course, with the modern day countries of Iran, which is really where you've got the kingdom of Media and Persia. You've got Iraq, which is really where Babylon is located. Of course, Syria. You've got Jordan, Israel, Palestine, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, even Afghanistan and Pakistan a little bit. We'll get to some of those areas, and of course, Egypt as well. So that's kind of the modern day countries of the areas that we're looking at. Here's another map. This is the Median Empire in the ancient Near East, circa 600 BC. So about the time of Daniel being taken captive by the Babylonians, this is pretty much what the area is going to look like. So you have the purple, and I talked about, the Median Empire is very, very powerful, more powerful than Persia, and you can see that here. Persis is the city down here. That's where Persia is going to be born. But the Median Empire is very powerful. They've got an alliance with Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian Empire through the marriage between Nebuchadnezzar and his wife from Media. And then down here, of course, is where Judah is at the time of the Babylonian conquest of Judah. All right, Daniel taken captive. So now we'll go back into the text and look at Daniel a little bit closer here. So let's turn to Daniel. So this is 605 BC. Like I mentioned, very, very busy year. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, and many others were brought as captives from Judah to Babylon by Nebuchadnezzar to train for 3 years in order to serve the king. So this is Daniel chapter 1, and it tells us right there, in the first verse of Daniel chapter 1, and it's great to me as somebody that appreciates history and things like that. It sure is nice when the author of these books gives you the time period, because they don't always do that. But it says right here, in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. The Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand. I think that sometimes you just skip over that and you don't really find the significance. God gave Judah into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, and we'll look at that again in a little bit. Nebuchadnezzar was acting for God, basically, to do this. The Babylonians changed their names to Belteshazzar would be the name that Daniel will be called within Babylon. Shadrach's Hananiah's name will be changed to Shadrach. Mishael's name will be changed to Meshach, and Azariah's name changed to Abednego. Daniel and his friends chose to serve God first and foremost during this time. Chapter 1, verse 8 says, "But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine which he had drank. Therefore he requested the chief of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself." Kind of putting it back into the context a little bit, Judah had not been real well off, and even though Daniel seems to be someone that was a prominent young man within the kingdom of Judah, and that's why he was chosen to go to Babylon, Judah was basically bankrupt. Times weren't good. I'm sure there wasn't just tons of food available for all these young men to be partaken of. And here you have the king's delicacies, the best of the best, being offered to Daniel and his friends. And they said, "Thanks, but no thanks. We're not going to defile ourselves by partaking of these delicacies, whatever they were." They may have been unclean meat or whatever that they weren't allowed to partake of based on the law of Moses, or maybe because they were food that was dedicated to idols or something like that. They chose not to defile themselves with this food, and instead they ate vegetables and they drank water instead of partaking of those things. This is a problem because the chief of the eunuchs thinks, no, that's not going to work, because I need you looking good for the king. He's wanting to train you, and if you're not looking very healthy or whatever, he's going to have my head, and for not obeying his command on what to feed you guys and things like that. So you have the little test that they do, and sure enough, Daniel and his friends, after the 10 days, I believe it was 10 days, they're much healthier than all the other men, healthier looking just by eating the vegetables and drinking the water, and so the chief of the eunuchs feels a whole lot better about it. And then in verse 19, or verse 18. Now at the end of the days, when the king had said that they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. Then the king interviewed them, and among them all none was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore they served before the king. And in all matters of wisdom and understanding about which the king examined them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers who were in all his realm. Thus Daniel continued until the first year of King Cyrus. King Cyrus there, by the way, he's the king of Persia. So that's kind of skipping ahead and just basically saying how long Daniel served in this capacity. God was with Daniel and his friends. Like I said, they were 10 times better than the magicians and astrologers. All right. So while Daniel is in Babylonian captivity, while that's taking place there, back to Judah real quick. You've got Jehoiachin rules Judah from 598 to 597 BC. You've got Zedekiah rules Judah as the last earthly king from 597 to 586 BC. In 586 BC, so this is after you have a couple of waves of people already being taken captive by Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians. But 586 BC, Judah completely falls to Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians, and Jerusalem is burned to the ground by a guy that's recorded in secular history and in the Bible. His name is Nebuzaradan, captain of the guard, and he burns the temple and all of Jerusalem to the ground, basically. Zedekiah, sad story about him. You may remember this story. His sons are killed in front of him, and then his eyes are put out, and he's taken as prisoner to Babylon. So the last thing that he saw in this life was his sons being killed in front of him, and then he's taken as a prisoner. So not a very glorious ending to the kingdom of Judah by the hand of Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians. Nearly all of the Jews are removed from the land at this time, and the land becomes inhabited by foreigners. You got people from Babylon, from Media, and all these other places that basically move into the homes of the people from Judah who had been taken. All right. So back to Daniel now. You've got Daniel interprets Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the statue of various metals. That's in Daniel chapter 2. And this is a interesting story. Nebuchadnezzar is very arrogant, but he's also kind of smart. He has this dream, and it was very troublesome to him. This is Daniel chapter 2, starting in verse 1. Now in the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, and his spirit was so troubled that his sleep left him. Then the king gave the command to call the magicians, the astrologers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans to tell the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king, and the king said to them, I have had a dream, and my spirit is anxious to know the dream. Then the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will give the interpretation. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, My decision is firm. If you do not make known the dream to me and its interpretation, you shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made an ash heap. I mean, that's kind of smart of Nebuchadnezzar, right? I mean, if you're going to have the ability to tell me what my dream is, you should also have the ability to tell me, or if you have the ability to tell me what my dream means, then you should also have the ability to tell me, okay, what was the dream at all? And of course, you know, they're unable to do that, and, you know, they plead their case with the king that this is something that's impossible. Nobody can do this. And the king basically is standing firm on it. And he's ready to kill them. He's ready to get rid of all of these people that are, you know, supposed wise men of the kingdom. And he actually is even going to go after these Jews that had been brought from Judah that were trained up to be able to serve him. Verse 10, the Chaldeans answered the king, said, There's not a man on earth who can tell the king's matter. Therefore, no king, lord, or ruler has ever asked such a thing of any magician, astrologer, or Chaldean. It is a difficult thing that the king requests, and there is no other who can tell it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh. You know, they're right. 100% they're right. There's no man that can do that. Only Only a divine being is able to accomplish this thing. So a decree went out, and they began killing, verse 13, they began killing the wise men, and they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. So they're looking for him. Daniel finds out what's going on, and, basically Daniel ends up praying to God to save him and his friends at this moment. And, not to spend too much time sitting there reading, basically God comes to Daniel and gives him the secret to Nebuchadnezzar's dream and what the dream was and what it meant. And so he prays to God there, verses 20 through 23. And then Daniel, starting in verse 24, is going to go to Nebuchadnezzar and explain the dream. And Daniel is very quick to give God the glory and give God the credit. Verse 28, but there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. So this is the dream, of course, of the statue. Verse 31, this great image whose splendor was excellent stood before you, and its form was awesome. This image's head was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. You watched while stone was cut out without hands, which struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, the gold were crushed together. He tells him the dream, and then he starts telling him the interpretation in verse 36. Verse 37, he says, verse 36, he says, this is the dream. Now we will tell the interpretation of it before the king. And to me, that's saying through God that he's going to tell him this. Verse 37, you, O king, are a king of kings, for the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. And wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field and the birds of the heaven, he has given them into your hand and has made you ruler over them all. You are this head of gold. But after you shall rise another kingdom inferior to yours, then another, a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. And like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others. So basically, this huge statue that Nebuchadnezzar had the dream about is representative of different kingdoms that are going to come after Babylon. And there's going to be more that go along with that same idea, right? Daniel interprets Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the great tree. That's chapter 4. Nebuchadnezzar has this dream again about this huge tree. And basically the interpretation is of that one that Nebuchadnezzar is going to be cut down. And he's going to be humiliated. That's chapter 4. And you've got Nebuchadnezzar's humiliation when it's carried out starting in verse 28. All this came upon, this is chapter 4, verse 28. All this came upon Nebuchadnezzar. At the end of the 12 months, he was walking about the royal palace of Babylon. The king spoke, saying, is not this great Babylon that I have built for a royal dwelling by my mighty power and for the honor of my majesty? Daniel had already told him who had given him the power to be able to do those things. And he had also already interpreted this dream just a year before this, that he's going to be humbled, but he still hasn't quite learned his lesson. Is not this great Babylon that I have built for a royal dwelling, but by my mighty power and for the honor of my majesty. And then while he was still speaking, it says, verse 31, while the word was still in the king's mouth, a voice fell from heaven, King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is spoken, the kingdom has departed from you, and they shall drive you from men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. They shall make you eat grass like oxen, and 7 times shall pass over you until you know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whomever he chooses. And that phrase right there to me is one of the themes of the book of Daniel, when he says the Most High rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whomever he chooses. God is involved in human affairs and human kingdoms and kings and decisions that are made. At least he was during this time period. That very hour the word was fulfilled concerning Nebuchadnezzar. He was driven from men and ate grass like oxen. His body was wet with the dew of heaven till his hair had grown like eagle's feathers and his nails like birds' claws. And this he's going to be basically a beast in the field for this time. It says, I think it was 7 times pass over him or whatever. But here you've got the king of Babylon, which he was the head of gold, right? So and all these other kingdoms, it says, are inferior to the one before it. So you've got Babylon, who is one of the richest, most powerful kingdoms in human history, and you've got Nebuchadnezzar, who is one of its most powerful kings, who is the head of gold in his dream, and he becomes like a beast of the field, eating grass. And that, it just shows you the power of God and how small we as humans are, especially when we think we're more than we are. Nebuchadnezzar is going to be restored, though, and he's going to become king again. Verse 34, and at the end of the time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my understanding returned to me, and I blessed the Most High, and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing. He does according to his will in the army of heaven. And among the inhabitants of the earth, no one can restrain his hand or say to him, what have you done? So he honors God. And that's really the end of the story, at least is what's recorded in the Bible, of Nebuchadnezzar. With his track record and with his lack of humility, it's very, very possible that the next day or the next week or month he turned back to thinking it was all about him again and not honoring God and being humble and submitting to God. But at least for a little while he wasn't. Maybe, who knows, maybe he did continue that throughout his life. We don't know. The next king is Belshazzar in chapter 5 of Daniel. Daniel interprets the writing on the wall for King Belshazzar. This is Belshazzar is going to take place around 539 BC. So, when you read Scripture, a lot of times, again, it's nice to put things into context, at least for people like me that care about that stuff. But a long time passes between chapter 4 and chapter 5. A decent amount of time passes here. Belshazzar is called a son of Nebuchadnezzar, but he's not a direct son of Nebuchadnezzar. He's probably a grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, and there's a few other kings that are going to be in between there that we don't have recorded. But you got the writing on the wall, and Belshazzar, Nabonidus, I think is the actual king in Babylon. Belshazzar's his son, and he's kind of ruling there in his place as kind of the crown prince. But in verse 5 it says, in the same hour the fingers of a man's hand appeared and wrote opposite the lampstand on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace, and the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's countenance changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his hips were loosened, and his knees knocked against each other. Persia had become, during this time period that I was just talking about, Persia, or the Medes and the Persians, had grown even more powerful during this time. There's some neat secular history that talks about how the Persians were able to conquer Babylon, and it has to do with Cyrus the Great draining some of the waters from some of the rivers and bringing the waters down that allowed them basically to enter the city of Babylon untouched and unfazed during what I believe is during this feast where all these people are gathered together, and it's kind of like the Trojan horse story. This Persian army just walks into the city untouched and basically just takes over, and Belshazzar is going to be killed this very night. And the handwriting on the wall, is a miracle of God that basically is telling Belshazzar what's happening. We know the story, and for time's sake, I need to keep moving for sure, but the writing on the wall is going to be explained by Daniel. Daniel had kind of been forgotten about, it seems, but the queen remembered Daniel, and they brought Daniel to Belshazzar, and he is able, through God, of course, to to interpret it, and that is the inscription was written Mene Mene Tekel Upharsin in chapter 5, verse 25. The interpretation of each word, meaning God has numbered your kingdom and finished it. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Perez, your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Then Belshazzar gave the command, and they clothed Daniel with purple and put a chain of gold around his neck and made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. That's kind of important with what I said a minute ago, because Nabonidus was the actual king. Belshazzar's the prince underneath him, and that would make Daniel third in the kingdom. But the kingdom is done because that very night, verse 30, Belshazzar, king of the Chaldeans, was slain, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. Darius the Mede has given me a lot of gray hairs over the last couple days because I've been trying to figure him out, because I thought he was the historic King Darius of Persia, but he's not. I don't believe. He comes a little bit before that Darius. Cyrus is the king of Persia. He united the Medes and the Persians together, and this Darius the Mede is a different Darius from the King Darius that reigns after Cyrus the Great in Persia. Jeff mentioned the dreams of the four beasts. We don't have time to get to that part in chapter 7, but it's a very similar dream with the statue of you have these four beasts that are going to represent four kingdoms that are going to come, the first one being Babylon. Daniel has a vision about a ram and a goat in chapter 8. The ram is Persia with the Medes and the Persians with the two horns. The goat is Greece, and it plainly says that, where it doesn't necessarily say that as far as what those kingdoms represent with the statue one. This one is very explicit and tells us what those kingdoms represent. In Daniel chapter 8, verse 20 says, "The ram which you saw having two horns, they are the kings of Media and Persia, and the male goat is the kingdom of Greece. The large horn that is between its eyes is the first king." And that's a reference to Alexander the Great, who was, a world conqueror, a great king out of Greece. All right. Daniel has a vision of the glorious man in chapter 10. And Daniel is given more prophecies about Persia and Greece and the end time in chapters 11 and 12, which we don't have time to get into. Nebuchadnezzar to Belshazzar, I'll cover this real quick. Nebuchadnezzar ruled Babylon from 605 to 562. And so I said it wasn't a direct line from him to Belshazzar. You've got Amel Marduk, which in the Bible is referenced as evil Merodach. He ruled from 562 to 560 BC for a couple years. Neriglissar ruled from 560 to 556. Labashi Marduk ruled just a couple months in 556. And then you've got Nabonidus, who's the father of Belshazzar. He ruled from 556 to 539 when Babylon's going to be destroyed or conquered by the Persians. And then Babylon fell to the Medes and the Persians in 539 BC. So Belshazzar, basically, he's called a king. And that's nothing different from, in the New Testament, you've got King Herod. He wasn't the emperor of Rome, but he was still a king. So you can be king without being the king of an empire. And I think that's the same way with Belshazzar. I think that's the same way with King Darius, who wasn't, the main King Darius of Persia, but he was Chaldean, or a Mede that came in the book of Daniel. All right. Okay, Daniel and friends are threatened after Nebuchadnezzar's first dream. This is about perseverance and remaining faithful and overcoming adversity. Daniel and his friends are great examples of those things, right? You've got, I read about, in chapter 2 about the first dream. Daniel and his friends, basically, they're fixing to get killed by the Babylonians through Nebuchadnezzar when no one can interpret the dream, but they pray about it. They ask for revelation from God. God gives it to them, and then things are a whole lot better after that. Refusal to worship the image of gold in chapter 3. That's Nadab, or not Nadab and Abihu, that's a different story. That's the fiery furnace when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are thrown into the fiery furnace. And they're saved by God through that when they won't worship the image of gold that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. You also got the Median leaders plot to trick Darius to get rid of Daniel in chapter 6. And if we had more time, I would love to get into Daniel chapter 6. That's a great story. You know, the Darius or Darius, Tyler Sam's always called him Darius. But the Darius that's talked about here really, really loved Daniel and respected and appreciated Daniel. And these guys come up with this plan to get rid of Daniel, saying that you could only worship Darius for a month or whatever the time period was. I think it was 30 days. And they made this decree. They made him put a signet ring in it that they couldn't go back on it. And then once Darius realizes the plot and that they're just trying to get rid of Daniel, he's very saddened and he has regret that he ever made this decree, but he can't go back on his word. And that's when Daniel's going to be thrown into the lion's den, even though Darius did not want that to take place. One key thing that I want to notice, though, in chapter 6, Daniel knew about the decree. He went home. This is Daniel chapter 6, verse 10, if you want to follow along there. It says, "Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went home, and in his upper room, with his windows open toward Jerusalem, he knelt down on his knees 3 times that day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as was his custom since early days." So he knew about the decree, and he still worshiped God openly with his windows open. To me, that's probably something that could be highlighted. His windows stayed open. He wasn't hiding in his closet. He wasn't, behind closed doors and trying to worship God that way. He didn't mind letting his faith be seen by others, even in the face of potential death by the king. And to be eaten by lions, of all things, that's not a good way to go either. All right, prophecies come true. Go through this quickly. Isaiah mentioned Cyrus by name as an instrument of God in Isaiah 44:28 through 45, verse 1. That's about a century before Cyrus is even born, much less becomes king in Persia, which happens in 559 BC. And some of this seems boring, but this is some really, really major faith-building stuff when you see God's prophecies coming true, and coming true to the degree that the guy was named over 100 years before he was ever born. And that happens in Isaiah. And then Cyrus becomes, of course, king of Persia. Again, one of the most famous kings in secular history as well. All right, you got the kings of Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome, and then the church all play out exactly as God through Daniel foretells in vivid detail. Alexander the Great of Greece conquers the Persian Empire in 334 BC. That's the goat with the one big horn. After Alexander's death in 323 BC, his empire split 4 ways. The kingdom of Macedonia, ruled by Alexander's generals, the Diadochi. The Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt, ruled by the general Ptolemy. The Seleucid Empire, Mesopotamia and Persia, ruled by the general Seleucus. And the kingdom of Pergamum in Anatolia, which is Asia Minor, ruled by the general Attalus. And all that is prophesied through the book of Daniel. In Daniel chapter 11, you get vivid description of the warring kings of the north and south. And this is a reference to the Syrian wars between the Seleucid kingdom, which is the north, and the Ptolemaic kingdom of the south, which took place on and off between 274 to 168 BC, kind of during that 400 years of silence period before we get to the New Testament part of the Bible. So this is after Alexander the Great dies. He dies, and 4 generals basically take over the kingdom, which, according to history, that's not exactly what he wanted. He wanted them to fight over it, but it was prophesied about, and so that's what happens, is the 4 generals split up the kingdom, and then there's a lot of infighting between them. They're going to become weakened, and that's going to open the door for the rise of Rome. Okay, I've got some more maps here real quick. This is going to go in order of the one we talked about first, which was Assyria, which is the world kingdom that conquered Israel, the northern kingdom, and took them captive. You can see the Mediterranean Sea over there. This is basically in yellow, you've got the kingdom of Assyria at the height of the empire. All of these are basically at the height of their empire. So that's Assyria, capital city at Nineveh. This is the Neo-Babylonian Empire. It's called Neo-Babylonian Empire because there was an empire in Babylon way before this. You've probably heard King Hammurabi. That was, I don't remember exactly what year, like 1400 BC. Or, sorry, 100 BC, somewhere in that time period. So this is the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Nabopolassar, who we mentioned. Again, a lot of secular history that ties right along with the Bible on these people. Nebuchadnezzar, Nabonidus, and Belshazzar. City of Babylon is right here, which is on the Euphrates River. This is the Tigris River, which goes, the history of those two rivers go all the way back to the Garden of Eden. You also, in this area of Mesopotamia, somewhere down in this area, you've got the city of Ur, which is where Abraham was from, which kind of ties a lot of this back in to itself as well. Right here is the Achaemenid Empire. This is the Empire of Persia at its height. So you've kind of now got a zoomed out picture of the lay of the land here. You still got the Mediterranean Sea right here, but this is around 500 BC. Again, Persia started here. Media was in this area, and then it expanded, conquering all these territories. I believe this is the Indus River in India, where there was early civilizations there. Of course, Egypt is right here, Libya, and then, of course, this is Greece right here, which we'll get to with Alexander the Great. This is the Asia Minor part we were talking about a second ago. All right, so here's Alexander the Great's empire, about 323 BC. Philip II was Alexander's father. He was the king of Macedonia, and he conquered the rest of Greece after the Peloponnesian Wars between some of the leading city-states like Athens and Sparta, which you can see on the map there. And so you've got Alexander, Philip II's son, who takes over all of Greece and just really rapidly is able to conquer all the territory that you see there. And he didn't live very long. Alexander the Great died pretty young, and that was the empire that he created. That was prophesied about in Daniel. And then after Alexander's death, here you have the four kingdoms. You got the Ptolemies from Egypt. You got the Seleucids, which were kind of in the area of Persia and Media, as well as Syria. Kingdom of Lysimachus and Cassander are up there. They weren't as notable as these two. And this is the kingdom, I believe, this is the kingdom of the north and the kingdom of the south that I think chapter 11 and 12 of Daniel discuss in pretty vivid detail when you go and look at that. And then you've got Rome, of course, which is in power. And this area, that's kind of the greenish looking area within the red line, that's the Roman Empire at the time Jesus was born. And again, it's kind of zoomed out even more. There's not as much control, at least at this time, to the east. You've got what's called the Parthian Empire that's going to kind of take over there. They did conquer the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt. So all this area is Rome. So you've got more, with Rome, you've got more kind of over into the European side of things, a little bit less in Asia during this time period. But this is what, Rome, of course, is the main power when Jesus is born in the New Testament. All right, quick lessons from the book. I know I'm out of time. We must trust in God and stay faithful. Make the most of bad situations. Daniel was in a lot of bad situations, first of which was he was taken as a prisoner from his homeland, probably made a eunuch, which probably wasn't excited about, and went through all kinds of adversity. We must not hide our faith. Talked about Daniel. He worshipped with his windows open. He wasn't afraid of death. He was going to serve God no matter what. Reminds me of Joshua. As for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. That was the attitude of Daniel. The Most High rules in the kingdoms of men. This is an interesting study when you think about that and all the different major players in world history and secular kingdoms that were affected by God. Really, really neat that's true. Prayer is powerful. You got Daniel big time in prayer. You got God keeps his promises. The Bible can only be God's word. Biblical history aligns with secular history. Cyrus the Great, over 100 years before he was even born, he was mentioned by name. And this is really kind of the ultimate part of the lesson here. Over 2,500 years later, we are living proof that the prophecies in God's word are true. Because we're part of the kingdom that we sang about before we started. We're part of the kingdom of Christ. We're part of the church, which is Christ's kingdom that will last forever until Christ returns. The final prophecy of Christ's return and the day of judgment will also come true. I told you that I would tell you who I was thinking of that reminds me of so much of Daniel, and that's Joseph. When you think about the story of Joseph and the story of Daniel, they both were basically slaves. They both interpreted dreams, and they both rose in rank and became extremely powerful in the kingdoms that they lived in and had huge influence over those secular kings, with Joseph in Egypt and Daniel in Babylon and Persia. So I thought that was kind of a neat side note with Joseph. But that last point there, the final prophecy of Christ's return and the day of judgment, it's coming true. And, we're assured that Christ has already won the battle. There's no more battles that have to be fought. Like Jesus has conquered Satan and sin. And it's just up to us to choose to follow him. So if you're not a Christian and you'd like to become one, there's no greater time than now to do that. If you are a Christian and need prayers of the church, or if there's anything we can do for you, we'd love for you to take care of that tonight. If you have any need, please come forward as we stand and sing the song.